Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. In this episode, Oscar and I dive into the powers of passion, patience, and the art of truly listening. Our discussion also covers the art of receiving feedback as a gift, recognizing its potential to fuel personal growth and propel us towards greatness. All in all, that just sounds fancy for Oscar and I tangenting for a good 30 minutes, and we hope you enjoy listening. I've been enjoying these conversations and hope you have too. If you have, please rate my podcast on your platform of choice and share it with others. If you would like to support with a donation to help keep this podcast going and support the work I do, you can become a patron of the show by visiting my website or patreon.com/sifumimichan. You'll also gain access to extra blog posts and videos. For comments or suggestions, reach out on social media at sifumimichan. Now, on with the show. Hello, Oscar.
Hello, Mimi.
All right, we are here. I don't know what number episode, but we're recording because anytime you and I get a moment to share space, we're like, let's do it. Let's podcast. We know all of our amazing fans out there of 2 or 3 people tell us they love when we just go back and forth and talk about random things. But in any case.
This is a huge sacrifice for me because I was planning on taking this short period of time to do my kettlebell swings.
Well, you could actually do kettlebell swings while talking. That would be a really fun episode, yeah?
I'll just push it till tomorrow. It's fine.
Well,
this
you could
takes
just
priority.
do like body weight.
Yeah, right. I could do that.
Okay,
so what are we talking about?
You said you always have questions for me.
Okay, and that's why I have my phone. So I think we've talked before that I take notes of things that are interesting.
Okay.
And sometimes I take those notes and then I say, I wonder how Mimi would talk about this. All right, here's the first one. This is a reminiscing one, which is, if you remember when we went to Taiwan and we saw at the museum that jade dragon, but there was a term that our tour guide used over and over again, and she called it the P&P technique. Do you remember what that is?
I feel like this is a quiz, not a conversation.
P&P is everything that we saw. They said, this is how this was done with the P&P technique. Oh, here. And this is, of course, done again with the P&P technique.
So basically, this episode is just how Oscar's a better listener and student than I am, because I do remember seeing all of the
passion
artifacts.
And patience.
Okay.
And I think it was funny because she kept saying that for a few times before explaining what it was. And we were like, oh, that must be some ancient Chinese secret. But it's really the secret for everything, which is if you're passionate about something and with patience, you can accomplish great things.
Okay.
So that's it.
I feel like I have a lot of passion, but not a lot of patience. Actually, last couple episodes, my birthday episode, the last solo podcast I did, I talked a lot about my impatience, actually. And so I feel like maybe when I do have both, there is usually a greater result now that I'm kind of reflecting back, but I definitely know that I am 1 P short of P&P.
Right. And this is not that I'm a good student. It's just sometimes like, oh, that's interesting. And I just jot it down. Not because I'm a good student. It's because I think it helps with my memory. Okay.
Well, it does help because I didn't remember the answer.
There's a term. I wrote this down. I can't remember who wrote it, but I want to say it was one of these newsletters
that you subscribe to.
I'm not going to even guess who it is, but it might be Robert Reich, actually. But anyway.
Okay.
The
Economist.
It might be that, or there's another one, but I'm probably getting it wrong.
Okay.
Naive realism, which I think we run into a lot because it's defined as, well, my reality is the actual reality. And if you disagree with me, you just don't know what reality is. And I feel like we run into this a lot because mainly when it comes to communication, right? Like you're communicating something with someone and you think they're getting what you're saying, but they probably don't. Or actually, maybe if it's more if there's a conflict resolution and you're trying to bring up, well, this is what I think happened. And then you're saying, well, here's what I think happened. And we know that our reality is the actual reality. And the other person, they just don't know what reality is. Anyway, what I'm saying is we all feel this way, right? And this is probably, if we understood it more, would lead to better communication, dialogue, conflict resolution. I don't know.
I think that a lot of us need to escape reality now because there's so much external input and dissonance, frustration, anxiety, stress, sadness, whatever you want to call it. But it's really rare that you could turn on a newsletter, a news channel, a app, or a whatever, like even in social media, right? Any of those things that jump out you and not see something that creates a reaction that is a little inflammatory, a little frustrating, right? So I think the need to escape reality and maybe read a good book or watch something entertaining or do something where it pulls us away from that which drives us crazy in our reality, then maybe kind of trickles over into like, I need everything to be my reality the way I want to see it. And then it maybe causes, I don't want to say a bad habit, but I think it causes us to maybe not be able to grasp certain things. But you're right. I think most of us, it's like being right? Most of us think we are right. Like, no, what I'm saying, this is how I remember it. So therefore it must be correct. And we've talked about this a lot. We find that our memory is very fragile and that how we remember the events and how they actually happen could be two different things. This is like that Black Mirror episode with the eye recording lens. If we had that, we'd be like, aha, you see. But I feel like, unfortunately, that is the future where whether it's by surveillance camera, whether it's a retinal camera or whatever, I feel like so much will be dependent on that. And there could be a benefit, obviously, for crime fighting and stuff like that. But then
for Batman, it'll help Batman.
But I feel like then do we get lazy, right? Then do we not rely on our memories and then have to try to reflect and be more accurate with that?
So let's talk a little bit more about this.
Okay.
This is good.
Oh, thanks.
This is good. I like the way your brain thought about this. I did a kind of a business mastermind group, and there was at one point someone said something, and it was like a quote, but it was like, this is my quote, this is what I believe, and they said it, and I wrote it down, and I was like, wow, that was awesome. And this person sitting next to me said, hey, what exactly did he say? And he looked over and he copied what I wrote, and I'm like, yeah, that was good stuff. And then that was the person to the right of me. The person to the left of me raised his hand, which is smart. Can you repeat what you said? And when he repeated what he said, I didn't really write it down exactly what he said. I think.
Is it because you were doing shorthand and it was too fast, or do you think you already had interpreted it by the time you put it?
Probably both. But I guess the point is that what he said exactly the way he said it was very impactful to me. I wrote it down and got the gist of it, which was also impactful for me. But when he repeated it, I was like, I like that better. And so it's just the point I guess I'm trying to make is that this is a positive version of this. But we always, what happens maybe, it made me think what happens so often, like instantaneously, I was like, wow, my memory is really jacked up. That what happens is that we then interpret situations, if we feel that they're slightly negative, more drastic than they are. It's like the reverse is true. Whereas this was a positive emotion. It was like, this guy said something. Wow, that was awesome. Okay, I wrote it down. I didn't get it 100% accurate, but it caused still a positive emotion, but just not as impactful as what he said. But if the reverse were true, and he had said something that maybe I found slightly offensive, my mind would have multiplied that offensiveness, that interpretation. And then the person next to me, to my right, would have said, what did he say? And I said, he said this. And that person really goes, what? Then we're both pissed off, but we need that person who was to the left of me to say, excuse me, can you repeat that? Then he says it and you're like, I'm still slightly miffed, slightly pissed off, but maybe I took it. And then you add to that time, and time keeps changing the story. That's all I got to say about that. I guess it's just when you said that made me think of this, which is something that we're always battling.
It is, especially the game of telephone. That
Mhm.
there's the game. Since the dawn of time, we talk about how so much is lost when it's told and told and told, and the accuracy part of it is essential because one word can flip the whole script.
Right.
I don't have a good example now because I am not as studious as Oscar. I have 0 notes, but I do know like one word missing or one word added to any sentence like can totally change things. In the same way, I've talked a lot about like that acting exercise where you can take the same sentence and the tone that you will interpret it. Because of course now it's a lot of text.
Mhm.
It's a lot of, we're reading the context. So if I say, oh, Oscar, nice shirt, that could be taken as, oh, Oscar, nice shirt. Or it's like, oh, Oscar, nice shirt. Right. And so when you read it though, it depends what your preconceived notion of who's texting you, why they're texting that or whatever. And so much is lost in translation, even when it's accurate.
Yeah.
Even when it's exact, it can still be misconstrued.
But instantaneous.
Yes.
You will recall one time we were leaving the temple and we were waiting to lock the gates, and I gently honked the horn on someone and waved and said, hey, and that person, their memory was like, you rudely woke me up.
Well, and you were like belligerent and yelling and angry.
Yeah. And so our memory is me honking, going, hey, hello, we're waiting on you. But it's just so funny, And to your point, this is something I learned from you well, okay, if that's what you're interpreting. Hey, let's talk about this right now. Actually, phone call, but even better, come in. Let's talk face to face.
Yes.
Because I think there's a misinterpretation.
I just. Yeah. People always tell me I'm so confrontational, like it's negative, but I'm like, don't we all feel better after we have a constructive and meaningful conversation? Like I won't actually waste my time to be confrontational if the situation wasn't important for me to get to the bottom of it, right? So the invitation alone to come in and converse should be seen as a tea party invite, right?
And that face-to-face conversation may be as uncomfortable as like a flick, and holding it in, I would equate it to like cancer growing into your body. Like seriously, that's how serious it can be.
Yeah, it can completely eat away at you, right? And yet, because again, we weren't that prepared for this podcast. We don't have science and statistics and things to go, well, the percentage of people that misinterpret blah, blah, blah. But pretty sure there's a high percentage of conflict could have been avoided with avoiding misinterpretation or miscommunication. Right. Conflict could have been avoided with a conversation or had been intervened. And just in my day-to-day, right? Just in my career of teaching, running my school, helping the other schools, being supportive of the Wallum system around the world, right? Just in all of those conversations, my statistic in my head is like pretty high. I would say in the 90 percentile of so many instances where a simple conversation was not had that I really believe could have prevented a lot of heartache, headache, and lost time and resources that you can never get back. Right. And so I guess the question is, because I'm so confrontational and my immediate response is like, let me get on the phone, let me call this person, let me find out what's the problem right now, let's set a meeting, let's whatever. Like that's my immediate response. Most people have the opposite. So what goes through, I guess, because you're a little less confrontational, like what is the hesitance? Because I want to understand it, because then I can maybe help people with overcoming that, or because I don't even understand it being that it's my main instinct is to jump at it.
Yeah,
and go,
so I think it's the words, right? So you're not confrontational, you're just resolution oriented. And I am not resolution oriented. I'm more of like, let me think about it. And so whereas you may look at it as this person's confrontational, this person is not, that's really, I think it comes down to almost like procrastination, right? Of or not even, or a fear of whatever that resolution is. So one of your superpowers is that you get things done. So I think because your brain works that way, you're not necessarily being confrontational. You're like, okay, I just know that this will this will resolve itself better if we just do this. And I think most people don't think that way. So then they resolve to doing things that they are used to doing, which is holding things in. Unfortunately, that makes it, I'm looking at it more as a way, because you said, how can I make it more helpful for people? I think if they look at it that way, as opposed to, well, I'm just not a confrontational person. It's not that. It's like, there's a task that needs to get done, which is this resolution. This is a much better and healthier way to do it. And by you procrastinating and putting it back, then it's just going to make things worse, and you're blowing things out of proportion, and and wasting time, basically.
Okay, I have another question then. What about feelings? Because people, I think, feel uncomfortable bringing up subjects that make them uneasy or an area that they're not used to exploring. Because my observation, I guess, would be that people, we're using the word confrontational, but resolution oriented, or maybe, like you said, maybe a big part of it is procrastination. Not that they're quote unquote scared to have the conversation, but I think it's the feeling they get of, oh, I got to make this call. It's going to make me uncomfortable. Like that, I think is a
feeling of uncertainty.
Yeah, uncertainty. Exactly. I think that's a big barrier. No?
Yeah. I think we're talking about the same thing. It's more of, yeah. I guess I agree with what you're saying.
Not that it can't be both. Both things can be true. Here's another thing, is that two things can be true.
No, they can't. It has to be black or white.
I mean, it's like people could be uncomfortable. People could be procrastinators. People also could just not even understand how to approach it. Not that it even makes them uncomfortable. People could also be oblivious, right? So there's so many things, but I think I'm just looking at like the overall generalism of like, I feel like so many people just feel, quote unquote, feel uncomfortable, right? And how do we overcome those things? Is that like overcoming a fear, essentially?
Overcoming a fear, which then, okay, so I've been in situations, and even at the temple, or even where you're running something, where I've felt like, whoa, that was, because even if it was directed at me, but maybe because we have these conversations and I've been on the other side of it, there's been a lot of times where I'm like, wow, and I immediately think, well, that's not personal, what was just said. That's just feedback. And feedback sometimes can feel like an attack. But if you take it for what it's meant to be, then your mind can, like, you can switch from literally feeling offended to being like, oh, okay, that wasn't so bad in like 2 seconds. Or you could take the feeling of being offended and just focus on that. I was offended and that wasn't right. And then you kind of, it's basically like cancer growth or digging a hole. And it's definitely a skill you've got to work on. And it's something that, it's not that I'll never feel that. Mm-hmm. I feel it all the time. Mm-hmm. A little bit of anger, anxiety. It's just that if you can pay attention to that feeling, that it's really not you, it's just a feeling that you're having. It's really, oh, this is Oscar experiencing fear, or whatever, however you define it. Then that feeling you can have, you can cut it by 99% or more, right? It can go from having fear for 15 minutes to like 2 seconds, like, oh, I was afraid there.
See, this is, and this might be like TMI for some of you, but this is something I talk about in therapy all the time because of the fear of XYZ, and read all these different books. And one of the most recent ones, which of course I'm going to forget, it's on my phone though, but it's like a lessons of happiness or whatever. Mm-hmm. But you naturally really do a lot of these techniques, which is pulling yourself out of the situation, looking at it as an observer versus the one to feel it. So it's like, oh, this is Oscar recognizes he's feeling this. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you said that versus I see that I'm feeling this, like, mm-hmm. that's even more powerful because you're really pulling yourself out as an observer of what's mm-hmm. happening versus the person feeling it. And it allows you to disconnect. Yeah. And then like the next step from there is like what you said, you're like, oh, okay, I see that's happening. And then it will cut down the time. And that's like actually one of the techniques that I have to work on all the time. And it just comes so naturally to Oscar, which is why you have less anxiety than I do. Yeah,
I wouldn't say it comes natural. I guess more of I've sought out ways to do it is the same way that you sought out. So what works really well for you is therapy and talking it over with someone. And what's worked well for me is sometimes reading something and kind of thinking, oh, okay, let me think about this. And that might work for me. Yeah. And then then what does come naturally is the ability to kind of let things slide. That's just my natural disposition for most things. But I can't, I guess since I'm cognizant of it, I get more upset when something really upsets me. That's what I think.
So you're like 0 to Hulk.
Well, if I get really upset, or if this thing that we're talking about, right? And then I come home and I say, oh, I had this meeting with someone and I was so amazing, blah, blah, blah. That's actually probably not super positive either, because I'm now hyping myself up in the same way. Like I was thinking about like how comedians like keep redefining lines, right? To make it better and better. So we have this story, which we're not going to get into, but it's the pirate story, right? Jack Sparrow's mom story. And when we first told that story, we had such great, it was like applause. It was like, everyone was like, this story's freaking hilarious. And we've told the story multiple times. And I feel like it's not that we've changed the story that much, but we've known where to pause, where to like add a little punch. And I feel
a little dramatization.
And I think it's super natural, like so natural for us to dramatize when we're slighted. Like when we feel we're slighted, like, wow, what they did was horrible.
So basically, I should be dramatizing this pirate story, by the way, everybody. You know what? Keep going on your thought.
Okay. So, and then on the same time, when we think we do something good, we dramatize it to make us even look more like a hero. I'm not saying like either one is really good or bad. I just noticed that. Like, I'm talking about I did something and then you asked me about it 5 seconds later, I've already changed the story to make myself look better.
All right. We've talked about that extensively. So 2 things. One is I want to be better about encouraging people to support this podcast, the work I do with Patreon. Have a lot of amazing, wonderful, wonderful humans that support me on a monthly basis. And thank you, because could not do this without you. But because of that, I am going to share that pirate story to my patrons only. So look out for that.
It's hilarious.
And
you got to share it like on video. You can't write this.
Yeah, I think we're going to do a little video of it. And that will be for Patreons only. So after this podcast drops, you'll get the story. And the second thing was treating feedback like a gift, and then the ability to receive feedback, but also the frequency. So kind of tying in all the things that we just talked about, could it also be that we as humans, or whatever the case, depending on our circumstance, maybe don't receive feedback enough to where we're a little less sensitive, or where we're able to be open to it. And maybe the more we get it, we realize it is a gift versus an attack.
Yeah, I mean, we can say we treat feedback like a gift, but any feedback, even if it's constructive, it's like, I'll take it and be like, oh, that's really great. Thank you. But while they're saying it, your heart's getting stabbed over and over and over. You're like, that's really great. You know what I mean?
So you're saying every time I give my students feedback, that's what they're feeling?
Yes, but, and this is what happens with me, and I hope it happens with him, is after that like stabbing of the heart with a spoon and just circling it. You're like, yeah, thank you. More, please. More, please. That they go back and reflect and go, okay, I can do these little things a little bit better. Mm-hmm. And I know it's happened to me, right? Where I've never had like a full audit where there's something, I forget what it's called, but a lot of like business professionals, like higher end CEOs, get this done where they hire someone to come in and interview everyone that you work with and ask all these questions. And then they take all of this, it's all anonymous. And then they give you this like personal audit. And it literally is like, from what I've heard, it's like you're getting assassinated, like getting tortured.
It feels, this is the funniest part.
But they're wanting, but yeah, give me feedback. I treat it like a gift. But really you're just, it's like, yeah, it's like 1,000 paper cuts.
I'm pretty sure that I would be like Julius Caesar at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think you would take it, and it would be a little bit painful, and there are some things that you probably would take really personally, and your instinct will be to defend yourself.
Right.
It's just natural, right? But hopefully you can take some time, and you would take time and reflect and say, there are some good points there, and yep, I can work on that. And I think about that a lot. I've got to give props to one of our massage therapists from years ago, Fran, who unfortunately her husband passed away. But remember what she used to always say: about like picking up after him. And she says, well, one day he won't be here. And I think about stuff like that all the time. If someone kind of annoys me, for whatever reason, I'm like, well, one day they're not going to be here. I guess two things that I'm natural at is letting things slide and thinking about death all the time.
Yes.
Do you want another question?
And that's the dark turn to the podcast episode, the death podcast. But I think that to kind of just tie that in is that no matter what, we just got to get practice kind of at everything. And that's what will make us, improve.
What have you ever done that's of value that you're instantly good at? I can't think of anything. You probably have a ton of them, but but I can't think of anything that's like, even stuff that you would say you're natural at. You're good at also. You're also good at because of exposure, right?
Yeah, I don't think
of
that
environment.
I just woke up and I was like, "Look, I'm so organized." It's definitively been something over time, and it just keeps getting either better or more OCD. I'm not sure how I want to look at that, but I do get more efficient about it, right? So it's that blessing and the curse thing, right? I don't know that anything worthwhile or anything that I've wanted to accomplish has not been done because of the hard work and the persistence and all of that. Absolutely. Because I actually don't think I'm so natural at things that people think I'm natural at. I was like,
yeah, I mean, people call it a natural, but they don't realize all the hard work that goes in it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That goes on in the background and it may not even be visible. It's just processing. Things are processing. And people aren't seeing it.
I would love to see like the inside of my brain, where if it's like this little hamster that's just running like
the inside of your brain is
happening?
like a beautiful mind where the numbers are going and they're like right, but they're on your eyeball.
But except it's not math. It's definitely not
math. Wouldn't be math. Okay. Okay, so this is a quote that I liked. I think I got this from the James Clear, who does Atomic Habits. He's got an awesome newsletter. It's very short. Here are a couple points that I was thinking about. But this was him talking about a book that an Aikido instructor wrote. That instructor's name is George Leonard, and the book is called Mastery. And here's the quote. It is possible that one of the reasons you got on the path of mastery was to look good, but to learn something new of any significance, you have to be willing to look foolish. When a most valuable player candidate misjudges a ball and falls on his duff, he does it in the sight of millions. So you should be willing to do it before your teacher and a few friends or fellow students. If you're always thinking about appearances, you can never attain the state of concentration that's necessary for effective learning and top performance.
Yeah,
that's got to speak to us as martial artists.
Yeah,
right?
but that immediately made me think about the Ethan. Is it Ethan Hawke? What's it? Oh my God, the name's like escaping me now.
You're looking at me, but I'm worse at names than you are.
You're the one that made me watch it. Play the fool, be the jester.
Ethan Hawke.
Ethan Hawke, right? Okay. Ethan Hawke video where he was during COVID and he wrote out this thing and he talked about like playing the fool and how important that was, and something that definitely isn't natural for me. And I think it's probably because I was surrounded by so much mastery growing up that I never wanted to look like I did anything wrong or that or embarrassing. So that's definitely something unnatural for me that I think only as an adult have I been able to verbalize and say, yeah, look, I'm not doing this correct. Hopefully my students will do it better. Like as a more seasoned instructor, did I start to have that? Whereas when I was younger, I needed to do all the flips. I needed to be able to do all the moves because it felt very much like a physical challenge that I always had to prove myself. And so it was very difficult to be in a situation where I was seen as like falling down or embarrassed, right? On a physical sense, right? Even on an emotional level, like I never wanted to be wrong when I answered the questions in school. And I think maybe that's a Asian American student kind of like, we're going like deep into the psyche here, a perfectionist mentality. But I definitely have a lot of embarrassing situations that I have publicly shared. And so I'm getting better, but that's really tough for me personally.
See, me saying this, I'm like, here, I'm going to tout one of my skills. But one of the things that I notice, like, let's talk about like Kung Fu class in general, specifically like the class that you teach us, which are our advanced Kung Fu class. And then we've done basics, but then it's time to do forms. One thing that I noticed with most of the students in that class is there's a very high intensity level and sometimes not as much focus on the fluidity. And I think because this is me projecting 100%, right? Who knows? I think that because they are trying to go that intense, because they're afraid if they don't, they'll look foolish. Like they're trying to show, look how much power I have. And one of the things that I've always done myself is not be, and maybe it's a break actually. Maybe it's me holding up back, but is that I try to go as slow and as smooth as I can. I've been trying to improve on that. So like, for example, yesterday, right, we were doing a form. I was like, let me just try to do this form as smoothly as I can, but not at my number one intensity. Now I know that there are different levels. There's 10 different things to think about while you're doing one move, right? And power is one of them. But I sometimes feel that some of our students are putting so much intensity into their movements because of that fear of like, well, I can't look bad while I'm doing this in front of, maybe even like because I'm a more senior student than another student. And this is, again, not in a negative way, because I think there's a lot of benefit to it, but sometimes it can be to the detriment of their martial arts progress because they're not focusing on these other aspects.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And not to go deep into that, but definitely that's why I've been trying to focus on like, maybe we think about this during this round, maybe think about that. But I think this is probably really one of the hardest things for people. And it's not just growing up as a perfectionist or Asian American. I think this is the experience of humanity where unless you literally are the court jester or the one that always like to make people laugh and be the one that's always like, let me make everybody, haha. But then there's is that your self-defense mechanism, psychology, right? But I think this is super challenging. And the earlier that we can help kids learn that that's okay, I think the healthier they'll be as an adult.
Oh, yeah. Well, it goes back, I think, to the first thing, I don't know, what was the first thing we talked about? But basically this whole being confrontational. Like, I think this circles back to that is, well, you want to have this conversation because you know that it'll resolve quickly. And then someone who is not confrontational, maybe they're afraid of looking like a fool, right? And that is probably a lesson we can all have, which is like, well, it's okay if I look like a fool for a little bit, as long as with people that I trust. So people who don't want to have these conversations or maybe don't want to look like a fool, maybe that's part of it too, is that they don't trust the person or the environment enough to realize that we're all fools. Like we're all like we can just moving around this planet like crazy people, Yes. So but if we were to trust the environment more, trust the people more, then maybe we would be more likely to say, well, I'll look a little silly here, but I'm trying,
All right. Well, that's, I think, some good food for thought. What's
Anything
the name
else?
of this episode?
I have no idea.
Sometimes Oscar and I just start talking and then we go, oh, we should have been recording this. It's so great. Our conversations are just so amazing. No, not really. But we do go, oh, this would be good to talk about, or this would be good to talk about. And that's where he does write his notes and go, all right, next time we have a good 30, 40-minute block, let's get together, put this on. And that way we can record it and see what comes of it. And I have to say, I know we tease about our 2 to 3 fans and things like that, but in all honesty, the feedback that we sometimes get, whether it's in person or a message or an email, and one person saying like this part was helpful, like this conversation, it's worthwhile for us anyway, but it also really helps us feel kind of that validation of, okay, we're not just talking out into space and into the ether, but that it's been significant and impacting. So thank you to those that have actually given us feedback. And if you haven't, that's okay, especially because luckily we haven't gotten too much negative feedback. So keep that to yourself. No, I'm just kidding.
If you're making, the little voodoo doll with the spikes on it,
don't let us know. We don't want to know. We don't want to know. Just maybe that's why my neck was hurting me the other day. I don't know what it is, but in any case, I just wanted to send a little gratitude and thank you to those that do mention, hey, I listened to this podcast and this was really cool, or that resonated with me. It does help us so that we aren't just rambling, and that a lot of the questions we can gear towards our audience. So always feel free to reach out, put in a message or a comment. We love hearing from you guys. Oscar, thanks for chatting with me and not doing your kettlebell swings. I won't tell Coach Brett Jones.
It's all right. I mean, I'll get him done tomorrow or not.
And actually, he wouldn't be like disappointed.
No.
He's a good coach that way.
True.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Till next time. That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to The Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram or Facebook.